Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC, the one place, LBC, where on a Sunday morning, rather than watching and listening to all the other programmes where it's journalists talking about journalists, you get your chance to have your say. Now, it's the 24th of June. The sun is shining, just as it was 2 years ago when we woke, I hadn't actually gone to bed, but when we woke up to find out this dramatic result had happened and the country, despite all the warnings, had voted for Brexit. 2 years on, many people who voted Brexit think we have not got anything like the progress we wanted. And it would appear that some, maybe quite a lot, of those who voted Remain are still really unhappy with the result. So I'm going to ask you this morning, would a second referendum be a good thing for the country? And then at 11 o'clock, as Trump receives massive criticism, initially for the separation of children from their parents when families were illegally trying to get into America, we compare the way the Americans deal with illegal immigration to how the European Union deals with illegal immigration, and there's an emergency summit taking place in Brussels today. And, you know, within a couple of weeks, Angela Merkel could be gone as leader of Germany. So immigration in many ways dominating global politics at the moment. And I'm going to ask you, whose policy is better, Trump's or the European Union's? But yesterday, about 100,000 people were in central London protesting, demanding that we have a second referendum. And one of the leading lights, of course, in this whole movement has been Gina Miller, and here she was yesterday.
It's time we took this back to the streets and the lanes, the towns and the villages, the meadows and the squares of this country. It is time for you to decide, for you to take back control. It is simply dishonest for them in that house to say that they still believe the will of the people is the same as it was 2 years ago. Together, we must stand up, demand our voices are heard, demand a people's vote, so that future generations can hear us say, we did our bit, we stood up and shouted for a country that's together, kinder, tolerant. This is not a time to be silent. Let me hear you shout for a people's vote now. People's vote!
Well, Gina Miller there, she wants a second referendum. Remember, she did her bit. She went to the Supreme Court to try and get Parliament to have a meaningful vote. And I guess the most prominent politician that was there yesterday, and by the way, no sign of Jeremy Corbyn. A lot of those people there yesterday wanted to see Jeremy Corbyn, but of course the truth is, he can't say it too loudly in public, but actually Jeremy's been a Brexiteer all his life. But the one big party leader that was there yesterday was Sir Vince Cable from the Liberal Democrats.
We've had our warnings yesterday about what could well happen in the future. You've had some of the most important companies in the country. Yesterday I was in Wales. The Welsh economy depends to a significant extent on Airbus. It's given a warning that if the current impasse in the negotiations continue, if we get no deal or if we get a bad deal with frictionless borders, all those things that Nigel Evans has described to you will not happen. We're already getting a slowdown in investment. It's very clear in the car industry, in construction and much else, and the future will not be bright if we continue along the present path. The divisions in the government, the mess they're making of negotiation, and we've got thousands of people here demonstrating, want to stop Brexit, want to have a people's vote on the final deal.
Stop Brexit. He couldn't be clearer, could he? Now, there were also yesterday in central London about 5,000 people marching in favour of Brexit. And don't think on this second anniversary that all the Brexiteers have gone silent. Here's Liam Fox.
We need to be pragmatic about how we actually achieve our exit. The other is to remind our European partners that we're not kidding, that we would walk away rather than accept a bad deal for Britain. I sincerely hope we get a good deal, and I think that's in the interests of the European Union as much as the United Kingdom.
So there's huge lobbying going on both sides here, and Theresa May going to Brussels this Thursday for a summit. This summit was supposed to be dominated by Brexit, but I think Mrs Merkel's problems and the massive row going on about migration may well push Brexit down the agenda. Now, another party that was there yesterday was the Green Party, and joining me this morning is the co-leader, Jonathan Bartley. Good morning, Jonathan.
Good morning, Nigel. Thanks for having me on.
No, not one bit. Now, Jonathan, I have to make a confession to you that in 1989, in the European elections, I was a paid-up member of the Tory party, but I looked at the Green manifesto, and it said that the European community, as it was then known, was bad for national democracy and gave us an economy that was dominated by giant multinationals and big banks. And you know what, Jonathan? I voted Green. I was very happy to vote Green. It's quite a journey your party's been on, isn't it?
It is quite a journey, but I noticed you the other day even were suggesting that you might back a people's poll. And I think you should...
Jonathan, I don't... Look, we had a referendum in 1975, right? In 1980, opinion polls showed a majority wanted to leave the EEC, but we had to wait 41 years for another referendum. Do you really think it's credible, just 2 years after the biggest exercise in national democracy in this country, that we have another vote?
Well, it's something that you were flagging just back in January yourself that you think was a credible option. You were certainly
I was warning people that it may happen. I don't want another. I mean, there's no need for another referendum. After all, everybody said that our decision would be final.
One thing I think we can both agree on, Nigel, is that these negotiations have been handled dreadfully. And
absolutely. Listen, I'm absolutely, completely with you on that, all right?
The referendum didn't settle the question, and it's clear from opinion polls, you mentioned opinion polls, it's now 2-1 in favour of having this people's poll. I think we both also agree that democracy should be an ongoing process. It's not a one-off thing where winner takes all. We know that the referendum divided the country, and that's the nature of a winner-takes-all debate, a winner-takes-all move, which has split the country down the middle. Now, we need an ongoing discussion. We can't just discard 48% of the country, and nor can we just ignore what the government is negotiating and the fact that it doesn't match up to what a lot of us voted for on both sides.
But actually, now, Jonathan,
what are you afraid of? Nigel, just what are you afraid of?
What I'm afraid of is, I think, a second referendum would be even more divisive for this country. And actually, when we talk about uncertainty, most people in business just want to know, what are the cards in my hand that I have to play with? And I think that to do this again would lead to greater uncertainty. It also, I mean, Jonathan, what would happen, Jonathan, if, let's say, in a second referendum, and actually, given that 70% of the country now just want the government to get on with it, I suspect if there was one, that the Leave side would win by a bigger margin, for lots of reasons. But I could be wrong. I could be completely wrong. Let's say that your side won 51-49. What should we do then? Have another referendum in 2 years?
See, I think the key thing is not to have a kind of another winner-takes-all vote. It's the process.
Well, either we leave or we don't.
But there are very, very different ways of leaving and very, very different ways of staying. And, going back to your original point that you opened up with, I didn't answer properly. I do think the EU needs reform. Absolutely, I do. And we need that conversation. And rather than having these two sides yelling at each other, and this is what my co-leader, Caroline Lucas, the point that she made in her speech at their rally, which I think was probably the best speech there yesterday. She's saying we need to re-engage with those people to understand what was behind the vote 2 years ago and understand where people are now.
So you want us to reverse our vote, Jonathan?
We have all been shut out of this conversation for the last 2 years. We've been forced to yell from the sidelines. The government has not involved us in what should have been a people's process. The referendum should have been the start of a process of engagement, of understanding where people are at. I've been to Leave areas, I've been to Remain areas, and I hear the same thing from those places. The people feel neglected. They are really angry. They feel sidelined by an elite, and I think we both agree on that as well.
Is it possible, Jonathan,
for the future of the country?
Is it possible, Jonathan, that actually Italy might leave before us? I mean, isn't the whole European project literally falling to pieces in front of our eyes?
I'm not the person to make predictions about the future of the European Union as a whole. I think anyone in this current climate where things are changing so rapidly would be very brave to make accurate predictions. But what I will say is I incredibly value what the membership of the European Union has brought to this country. I really value the EU nationals who treat my son regularly at a hospital, who's a wheelchair user and depends on the NHS. I value the freedom that I had to move throughout Europe and continue to have at this time, and I want for my children. And I'm listening to my children right now who are very, very concerned about the direction that this country is taking, the path that we're set on, and are really frightened for their future. And that fear comes from a growing xenophobia, a vision of Britain that wants us to look inwards.
So the Leave vote was xenophobic, was it?
No, I'm saying that the whole direction that this country has taken is very much turning in on itself rather than looking outwards, trying to build walls rather than bridges. And if we are going to tackle the challenges that we face in the 21st century, we're going to have to build those bridges. We're going to have to work with partners. And I'm very, very worried that the direction we're taking ourselves in is shutting us off and shutting us down. I'm
tempted to say we have been building walls on the bridges in London to protect our security, and that's one of the reasons people did vote Leave. Jonathan, the big day, whatever kind of Brexit it may or may not be, the big day is the 29th of March next year. If we do leave the European treaties we've left, do you right now believe that we will or will not leave the European Union at 11 p.m. on March the 29th next year?
I'm not going to make predictions. I tell you what I want, and that is I want the people to be involved in the process. I want a people's poll. And personally, I will go on campaigning as long as I possibly can to stop the Brexit process, because I believe before the referendum that it was the wrong decision. My views haven't changed. I still believe it's the wrong decision, and I will always fight to my dying day for the things that I believe in, the principles that I hold dear.
And there's nothing wrong with that in a democratic process, and I understand that fully. Jonathan Bartley, co-leader of the Green Party, thank you for joining me. Well, you've heard the argument for a second referendum. Would it be good for the country? I think it would be even more divisive than the last poll that we had. I think it would lead to greater business uncertainty, and it'd have been absolute kick in the teeth for the entire democratic process. We were promised whatever we decided was final, and now the established political classes want to reverse Brexit. It simply isn't good enough, in my view. Let me know what you think. Call 0345 60 60 973. You can text to 84850. You can tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. And, of course, you can watch us on Facebook Live and comment there too. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show here on LBC, and it's now 16 minutes past 10.
Sheila Fogarty, Monday to Friday from 1 p.m.
You sound like an abusive husband saying she made me do it. She didn't make my tea right, so I punched her in the face.
There's nobody more against domestic violence than I am.
There's nobody more against terrorism than me. The IRA, appalling. If I was a voter in Northern Ireland, Sinn Féin would get my vote the day hell freezes over.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
The real reason Sleeping Beauty fell asleep was because it was taking so long for the palace to sell. And the handsome prince needed the proceeds to buy their new home with no time to dwell.
I know who can help. Property Rescue. I'll contact them straight away.
So he spoke to their friendly team who took care of every detail. They bought the palace direct with no legal fees to pay. Fast forward to living happily ever after. Visit propertyrescue.co.uk. Property Rescue. Fast forward to sold.
We got it at Selco. Selco, it's where the trade go.
Looking for a wide range of plasterboard? Well, Selco's got it. Want to know that it's in stock? Selco's got it. Want trade prices too? Yep, Selco's got it. A massive range and huge stocks of specialist and performance plasterboards, all at great trade prices. Selco's got it. See selcobw.com to find your nearest branch. Got it?
We got it at Selco. Selco, it's where the trade go.
Did you catch that?
Lovely.
Oh, yes.
Oh, darling.
Oh, my.
There are many, many, many ways to explore the robust yet cultivated regions of Bordeaux. But only one way to fly. Fly British Airways from Gatwick to Bordeaux from £33 each way based on a return fare. Availability and dates are limited. Conditions and booking fee may apply. cba.com/Gatwick for details.
At Boots Opticians, we're here to help you discover a stylish new look for less. We've got thousands of frames to choose from, so speak to us and together we'll find the perfect pair for you. In fact, with 2 pairs from £75, why stop at just one? Book in store or at boots.com. Boots, let's feel good. 2 for £75 on Boots £50 glasses as part of our half-price additional pairs offer. Both pairs must be bought for the same customer in the same transaction. Subject to availability. See in-store.
Landlords, Direct Line guarantees to beat other insurers' renewal premiums for the same cover. Can your insurance do that? Switch to Direct Line Landlord. New customers only. Qualifying criteria apply. Underwritten by UK Insurance Limited.
Ocean Credit Card.
If you're looking for a credit card with a credit limit of up to £1,500, go to checkocean.co.uk and see in seconds if you'll be accepted for an Ocean credit card before you apply. Checking won't affect your credit rating, so it's a no-brainer. Find out if it's a yes. Go now to checkocean.co.uk. 39.9% APR representative variable. Intelligent Lending Limited is a credit broker. Capital One is the exclusive lender.
Checkocean.co.uk.
It's Super Weekend at Lidl with up to 50% off selected products. Get a pack of luxury muesli for 99p, a block of organic cheddar cheese just 99p, and a bag of soft pitted apricots just 49p. Lidl, big on quality, little on price. Subject to availability, selected stores, excludes NI in Scotland.
The Nigel Farage Show on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
So on the second anniversary of Brexit, 100,000 people march in the streets to demand a second referendum. Some say it's on the final deal, although I think Vince Cable perhaps had more clarity than the others. He simply wants to stop Brexit. And all of this, of course, against the backdrop of the Airbus announcement. Now, Airbus saying if there is no deal, they would seriously consider what their future would be in manufacturing in the United Kingdom because they want us to be part of the customs union stroke single market. My thoughts on that. Airbus is an intensely political company. It was set up that way. It has been subsidised by billions and billions and billions of euros of taxpayers' money. And where their argument falls to pieces is aerospace internationally under World Trade Organization rules is a no-tariff regime. So Airbus, it makes no difference to you whether we're in or out of the customs union or single market. And Airbus, most of your engines are made in the United States of America, which of course is not part of the European Union and doesn't have a deal. And when you threaten us and say that if you close down in this country, you might move to China, well, China, I don't think, is part of the European Union either. This is business scaremongering. We saw it, and being done in a very political way. We saw it 20 years ago with the euro. We were told by big firms, told by many in the city, if we don't join the euro, Britain will fall to pieces. Well, we didn't listen to them then, and we shouldn't now. But let's get back to the march, and let's get back to the motivation. And I want to really understand why people think a second referendum would be good for this country, because we really do not hear this argument enough. And I'm going to go straight to Phil in Cobham in Surrey. Good morning, Phil.
Good morning, Nigel. Well, I mean, I went on that march specifically because I'm representing a new party, Renew. You know, you've heard about it.
Yeah, more than that, you've been on the show, Phil. So, you know, I like to give all sides absolutely the opportunity to put their point of view.
Absolutely. I mean, Nigel, you admitted yourself that back in 1989, just on this programme earlier, that you considered joining the Greens.
I voted Green. I voted Green because, Phil, I voted Green because they said that the European community was bad for democracy, and I agreed with them, and they also said that it played into the hands of the giant multinationals, and I agreed with it then, and I agree with that argument now.
Well, for sure, but the bottom line is that the world has changed enormously since then. That's why the Greens have changed their position. They see that the future lies in international cooperation, as exemplified, in my opinion, in the form of the EU. But I mean, bottom line is they changed their opinion because of how the world has changed, primarily driven, in my opinion, by the internet revolution.
And money, Phil, may have something to do with it, in that European political party funding, etc. I might just throw that in as a suggestion.
Well, but you throw that into everything. I mean, you know,
what is true?
You know, regarding the Airbus issue and stuff like that. Of course, there are always lobbying factors here. I mean, that's the world. That's the modern world we live in, and that's just the point.
Phil, I accept that. I accept that. But you tell me why. Tell me why, Phil. Please, just tell me why a second referendum would be good for this country.
But For starters, because of the huge ramifications of a decision that was given to people largely, and I don't mean this disparagingly at all, because it's totally understandable, but most people were totally ignorant of the true facts. But this is true, Nigel, whether you like it or
people.
not. It's not stupid. It's not. Most people, look, as you say, if I've got an ailment, Nigel, I don't deal with it myself. I go to an expert. This is the whole point. This is why we actually do have, and we can vilify experts, but ultimately you have to trust people who know more about the subject than you do.
Yes. I've heard that. I mean, that's the European Commission's argument. You know, why?
Well, it's a totally justified argument. I don't see how you can say yes, Nigel. I could say to you, how many people know how the European Union operates? Who's in charge of the institutions? I could go on the street now. I could come over to LBC headquarters. We could do it right now, and most people wouldn't have a damn clue.
Well, maybe not on technical detail, Phil, but the actual referendum itself, if you think about it, it couldn't have been simpler, could it? Do we wish to be a self-governing nation for good or bad? Or are we better off being part of a big political union called the EU? That is what the referendum was about. Simple as.
Absolutely, it's so simple as, and with huge ramifications.
Of course.
The world has moved on. We face an unbelievable challenge coming from the east, and we have no idea how that is going to play out.
Well, the world has moved on, Phil, since the referendum, because now, I don't know whether you noticed, but in Sweden this week, the Swedish Democrats took a 7-point lead in the opinion polls on a manifesto of giving Sweden a vote on whether they should stay or leave the European Union. We've seen a political revolution in Italy, and we've now got the growth of the AfD in Germany threatening Merkel's position. I mean, Phil, Phil, this is big change.
Do not understand what the European Union ideal is all about.
So all Europeans are stupid?
That is the problem.
So it isn't just the Brits that are stupid, all Europeans are stupid?
You're always going to have a section of people who will challenge the status quo for whatever reason. Maybe their own gain. Maybe these are business people who see maybe a little angle for their own gain. There's always you can always point to some person's specific reason for doing something. Okay. And maybe some of them are straight on racist. I don't know.
Right.
Bottom line is,
stupid, racist. We're hearing it all here, aren't we, really? You're very disparaging. You're very disparaging about Leave voters, Phil.
I'm just proposing it as a possible, alternative explanation to just, the fact that suddenly people think the EU is this evil monster, which they don't largely understand, and they don't understand the ideals of it. We could all do one thing, just look up the original preamble to the reasons for the creation of the original, European EEC, as it was then, and just read what that is, all about. It's a very, enlightening and ennobling. It's only a few paragraphs long. It would help people to understand.
Phil, I know. I've been 20 years in Brussels, and I know a lot of the old timers, people who've served their entire careers in the European Commission, have said to me, "We came here in the 70s, we came here in the 80s." We believed in the project. We believed in post-war reconciliation between France and Germany. And nobody in their right minds, Phil, back in the 50s could have opposed that idea. The trouble is, it's morphed into something very different. And that's the argument I get even from inside. Phil, let me just ask you a quick comment on something. I've seen the pictures of the people that were in the crowds yesterday. It looked incredibly white and middle class.
It was incredibly white and relatively, I would say, middle class.
Yes.
But there were, there were plenty of blacks there. As I said, predominantly, yes, for sure. But ultimately, you still got to balance that against the demographics of our country, which is predominantly, white and arguably middle class.
Oh, I wouldn't agree with that. Phil, listen, I've given you a good showing. I'm going to move on. I've got lots of other people want to come on. Robert on Facebook says, why wouldn't Leavers want to pass up the opportunity of showing Remainers that even more people than ever want to leave the EU? Robert, I'm absolutely convinced, particularly given the way that Barnier and the others have behaved, it's put people's backs up. I'm convinced the second referendum would see a bigger result for Leave. But why on earth should we have to go through it? We were promised it would be a final result. And all right, a second referendum in 20, 30 years' time might be reasonable, mind you. I'm not sure it'll even exist in 10 years' time. Richard says, we had a vote and we all knew what we voted for. The government sent out a comprehensive leaflet stating exactly what the vote meant. Stop trawling that silly excuse. It was quite clear. Let's go to Chris in Croydon. Good morning, Chris.
Oh, good morning, Nigel. Yes, the point I'd like to make is, in fact, these protesters yesterday shot themselves in the foot with their own argument when they said that democracy is an ongoing process. The EU is the reverse of that. It is ever-growing centralisation.
Yes.
So the logic of it is, OK, suppose we vote and vote to go back in. What happens in 5 years' time? We change our minds, as electorates do, as many of those people will do as they get older and wiser, I should hope. That's the whole thing. That's with being a noble ideal. That's the lack of accountability has turned the most noble ideals into tyrannies.
Yes.
Look at the Roman Catholic Church, for example.
Well, and one could argue, Chris, communism. You know, that in 1917, in Russia, there were very high ideals, and look at the monster that it became. Chris, your point's a good one, because what is interesting, they also, yes, of course we need some reform, Nigel, but Monsieur Macron and Mrs. Merkel, however long she lasts, I mean, they're currently proposing a Eurozone budget with a Eurozone finance minister with the power to intervene in nation-state economies. They're moving even further away from democracy, Chris, aren't they?
Yes, and another thing, what happens once we got safely back in? I mean, it's like a man who's just been let out of jail, hammering on the gates of Wormwood Scrubs asking to be let in, isn't it? Suppose once we're safely back in, and old Merkel says, oh, by the way, here's your 200,000 sub-Saharan African refugees. That's your allocation.
Yeah, and of course, the rebate would disappear completely. I mean, any thought of saying that we wish to stay, we wish to rejoin, they would utterly and totally humiliate us. Chris, your point about democracy is a very powerful one. I thank you for it. Well, after the break, more of your calls. Would a second vote benefit this country? I don't believe it would. Let me know. 0345 6060 973. Plus, we'll talk a bit about the Turkish elections, which are taking place today and could see big change in Turkey. But for now, it's 10:30 and time for the news headlines with Philip Chrysikos.
Unhealthy snacks at supermarket checkouts could be banned under government plans to halve childhood obesity by 2030. Campaigners are praising what they're describing as bold and ambitious comments, but say it could happen sooner. A 15-year-old boy has been stabbed to death after leaving a birthday party in East London attended by up to 100 youngsters. It happened at a community centre in Romford last night. 3 teenagers have been arrested on suspicion of murder. Leaders from 16 European Union countries are holding an informal meeting in Brussels discussing how to deal with the migration crisis across Europe. The UK is not taking part. LBC weather, blue skies and sunshine, a high of 25 degrees.
LBC Travel, there are queues in Essex on the A13, Stamford-La Hope bypass westbound. It stays partially blocked because of an accident between the Stamford turnoff and Alcett-Cock. In Wandsworth, the South Circular Upper Richmond Road stays closed westbound because of roadworks at the A3 West Hill. It means traffic's being forced to go down West Hill instead. Camberwell New Road is partially blocked in both directions because of an accident at Flodham Road. In Kensal Green, Scrubs Lane is closed in both directions between Harrow Road and Waldo Road because of water mains burst. And on the rails, there's no service on Eurostar at St Pancras. It's because of overhead power cable problems. LBC Travel, I'm Dave Goff.
This is LBC.
Clive, what's doing Wolf? Whale music? You must be one stressed-out private landlord.
Yes, I am!
Your tenants are struggling financially and can't pay their rent. But you're with Direct Line. They'll repay any unpaid rent until your tenants are out. So drop the stress ball. It'll all be over soon. Ah, that's better.
Claim back unpaid rent after 1 month's arrears with Rent Guarantee. Can your insurance do that? Search Direct Line Landlord. Cover purchased as part of legal expenses add-on. Qualifying criteria apply. Restricted claims for existing tenants in the first 90 days when product first purchased.
Experience the thrill and excitement of a cup final at the home of cricket.
And there it is. It's been a tight, tense all day here at Lord's.
The Royal London One Day Cup Final takes place at Lord's on Saturday the 30th of June.
It's away, leg side, gone! Amazing scenes.
Tickets are available from just £30.
He can't get there. What a game of cricket we've seen.
History is made at Lord's.
The last thing you need in London is more stuff. The London Storage Vaults are in an underground vault near Oxford Circus. It's self-storage that's convenient, climate-controlled and completely safe. Ideal for everything from sports equipment, stock, furniture or artwork, with free collection from Zones 1 and 2. There's 24/7 access and prices start from just £10 a week.
London Storage Vaults, the future of self-storage. Visit londonstoragevaults.com. Terms and conditions apply.
Vision Consulting Chartered Accountants have seen astonishing growth over the years. So now, their ever-expanding client base means they're looking for remarkable people to join the Vision Consulting team in all areas of the business. In particular, they have immediate start vacancies for senior tax directors and payroll clerks. But they'd love to hear from anyone with a proven track record in accountancy. For a bright new future, visit visionconsulting.co.uk and apply today.
At Boots Opticians, we're here to help you discover a stylish new look for less. We've got thousands of frames to choose from, so speak to us and together we'll find the perfect pair for you. In fact, with 2 pairs from £75, why stop at just one? Book in store or at boots.com. Boots, let's feel good. 2 for £75 on Boots £50 glasses as part of our half-price additional pairs offer. Both pairs must be bought for the same customer in the same transaction, subject to availability. See in store.
Choosing your new ride and about to get your car finance from the dealership? Hold up. Before you take their offer, compare car finance deals at Confused.com and you could save over £1,000. Now let's try that again. Choosing your new ride? Visit Confused.com/car finance and you could save over £1,000 versus the dealer. Representative APR 5.9%. Based on £9,000 hire purchase loan on a £10,000 car with a £1,000 deposit and repayment over 48 months. Credit subject to status. Visit Confused.com/car finance for verification.
This is LBC, the Nigel Farage Show. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Tweet at LBC using the hashtag Farage on LBC.
Well, 100,000 people marched to say there should be a second referendum, that Brexit has got to be stopped, and we have a debate on that. And one of the representatives, Phil, of the Renew Party, makes some, I think, pretty disparaging comments about Leave voters. Nikki on Twitter has picked him up. Caller Phil is very generous. He says people that voted Leave may not have been thick, just racist. Well, there was a bit of an implication of that. But let me know, do you think a second referendum would be a good thing for this country? Meanwhile, in Turkey, and we don't talk a lot, really, in this country about Turkish politics, but there is a big presidential general election going on in Turkey today. President Erdogan, very much the strong man of Turkey and seen by many to have taken Turkey in a route that is pretty undemocratic, use of emergency powers. But for once, he has a real challenger. And to help us find out a bit more about what this might mean, I'm going to go to Michael Daventry, the former editor of the London Turkish Gazette. Michael, good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. So we've got a challenger, I understand, President Erdogan.
Well, we've got 3, actually. We've got, in order of least popularity, there's a Kurdish candidate who is in prison. There's a woman who's broken off from the main nationalists. And then there is a man called Muharrem İnce, who's been nominated by the main opposition, CHP, the secular party. And he's run a campaign that's energetic and has been widely praised, actually, in Turkey. The question is, how well will he do?
I don't know. I'm asking you.
Well, I wasn't putting that to you as a question.
No,
we're not sure how well he will do. Part of it has got to do with the robustness of the Turkish electoral system, because there was a referendum in the country last year where they decided to move away from a parliamentary democracy and create an executive presidency system, and that gives sweeping powers to the president at the expense of Parliament. This is the first election that we have using those new powers. So if President Erdogan wins, he gets those powers. But if Muharrem İnce wins, then there's a chance, then he will get them. Yeah. But everyone is expecting at the moment that it will be an Erdogan victory.
So the stakes are pretty high. And you mentioned the word secular. Of course, modern Turkey, founded by Ataturk, made famous by beating the British at Gallipoli. I mean, how far away from being a secular state has Erdogan taken Turkey?
Well, Turkey had a big problem with religion. Ataturk did a lot of wonderful things for Turkey, but one of the things a lot of his supporters and followers had done was to interpret this question of dividing mosque and state to extreme levels. So there was a stage 20 years ago where if you were a woman, a qualified doctor, you would not be allowed to work in a hospital because you were wearing a headscarf. If you took the headscarf off, that's fine. Suddenly you become a medical professional. But before that, you weren't allowed. So what President Erdogan's party has done in recent years, or previous years rather, was to change that. to basically say we shouldn't be afraid of religion. However, his popularity and the ineptitude of the opposition in the country has seen him take this very authoritarian strain.
Yeah, and I noticed over the last couple of weeks the Turkish currency having a very, very poor time, Turkish interest rates, Turkish bonds. I mean, there is a financial crisis with this too, isn't there?
Yes, there is. The dollar has shot up. The dollar almost reached $1 was worth about 5 lira at one stage, which is extremely high. And every Turkish person will follow the exchange rate because a lot of them will keep their savings in a foreign currency as they historically don't trust it.
Yes.
So there is an economic side to it, and the economy is definitely sluggish. But there are other aspects to this as well, and one of them is actually the European Union, because the European Union was, for Turkey back in the day, actually a very good thing. It was a source of inspiration and reform. It's because of EU-mandated reforms that Turkey did such things as abolishing the death penalty, or to do, boring but important policies like introducing housing ombudsmen and the like. But the EU has taken its eye off the ball of Turkey for a multitude of reasons, and that's contributed to the situation that Turkey is in today.
Fascinating. Michael Daventry, thank you. Well, we'll see what these elections bring, and Michael Daventry, former editor of the London Turkish Gazette, saying that Erdogan is still the favourite, but there is a big challenger. Maybe he can form some sort of coalition with the Kurdish. We'll have to see. But whatever. Turkey, definitely a country that is in some real trouble at the moment. Some breaking news. German police say 25 people have been injured, 4 severely, after an explosion destroyed a building in the western city of Wuppertal. We'll find out more about that over the course of the next hour or two. So back to the people's vote that Gina Miller wants, and some not all that impressed with Gina Miller. Who does Gina Miller think she is? One thing she is that she's a troublemaker. She's a stirrer. We had a Democratic vote, and the votes that won were to leave the European Union. Les in Lewisham representing, a very frustrated point of view of some of the leavers. Philip in Whiteleaf says, if those of us who voted to leave were too stupid to understand what we voted for, then what would be the point of a people's vote, as we wouldn't understand what the deal was? Let's go to Martin in Dartford. Good morning, Martin.
Good morning, Nigel. Pleasure to speak to you. Before I go to the main point that I rang in for, going back to Phil's comments earlier, Brexiteers must be racist.
Yes.
I am a staunch Brexiteer.
Yes.
My partner's Italian, and she's also vehemently in favour of leaving. Mm-hmm. My sister-in-law is Indian, and one of my 7 staff is Lithuanian, so I think he's talking rubbish.
Yeah, it's... I have to say, it's just part, though, Martin. It's part, Martin, of this narrative that was just sort of people who vote leave aren't quite bright enough. People who are cleverer than us and morally better than us should make these decisions. Martin, what's your main point?
Right. Unlike you, I think we should have a second vote, but the criteria should be different. We're leaving. That's it. We've made that decision 2 years ago. We should have a vote on whether we accept the government's pathetic attempts at negotiation, or whether we leave without a deal. Because once we sign on the dotted line, we're stuck with that awful deal for decades.
Well, I'm not sure that's true, Martin. I understand what you're saying, but it seems to me that the real moment that matters here above... And by the way, Martin, I share all of your frustration. But it seems to me what really matters is 11 p.m. on March the 29th next year. Because if we break with those European treaties, we are once again a sovereign country. We are once again able to do what we like, and that would include, at general elections, fundamentally changing, through our decision, any deal that Mrs May has done.
Right.
That's my view. I mean, I could be,
I think if anyone tried to change that, we'd be back to where we are now with people like Gina Miller arguing the point that we can't.
But the other, the 100,000 people yesterday, they are saying, let's have a vote on the final deal, but of course what they're saying is, you're saying a vote to accept the final deal or leave without one. They're saying, of course, that it's a vote to accept basically, a chance to reject the deal, and if we reject the deal, we stay members of the European Union. So that's what they're arguing for, Martin. Martin, I understand what you're saying. I don't think there's much demand for it from other Eurosceptics.
Maybe not, but my fear is if there is a second vote now, because people are so disillusioned with the government's deal,
yes,
they might think, oh, maybe we should stay.
Yeah.
And if we did, as I think it was Chris before the news alluded to, the EU would cane us.
Oh, yeah, we'd be...
People talk about keeping the status quo. There wouldn't be a status quo.
No, absolutely, I agree with that totally. Martin, I thank you very much indeed for your call. No second referendum. What's the matter with these Remainers? They are just selfish people, in my opinion. They have no interest for the good of the country at all. If they did, they would accept the democratic vote. Well, that at least is the view of Kathy. I have to say, that clearly we need to recognise that there is some passion on the other side of the argument. There are those in this country who profoundly believe that the European Union is the right way forward for this country. But they are very much a minority. Now, coming up after the break, a great titan of British politics has intervened and threatens that he might bring down the Prime Minister. This is him speaking on the subject of Russia.
It is absolutely atrocious and outrageous what Russia did in Salisbury. We have responded to that. Frankly, Russia should go away, it should shut up.
I wonder if you can guess who that is. Gosh, doesn't he sound important? Doesn't he sound impressive? And he's threatening, perhaps, to bring down the Prime Minister. All will be revealed in a moment. For now, you're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, and it's 10:45.
This is LBC.
The Mail on Sunday is Britain's best-read Sunday paper, and free inside this weekend. Property gurus Kirsty Allsop and Phil Spencer show you how to add thousands to the value of your home without spending a fortune. Kirsty and Phil's home makeover is packed with brilliant ideas to transform your home. Plus, there's our free 24-page property guide. Whether you're buying or selling, our experts cover everything you need to know. Don't miss Two Hot Properties, free with this weekend's Mail on Sunday.
Choosing your new ride and about to get your car finance from the dealership? Hold up. Before you take their offer, compare car finance deals at Confused.com and you could save over £1,000. Now let's try that again. Choosing your new ride? Visit Confused.com/car finance and you could save over £1,000 versus the dealer. Representative APR 5.9% based on £9,000 hire purchase loan on a £10,000 car with a £1,000 deposit and repayment over 48 months. Credit subject to status. Visit Confused.com/car finance for verification.
How do you think England are going to do this summer, Bob?
I don't know, John, but I've got a good feeling about Iceland. They're demonstrating an impressive 3-2-1 formation.
That's right. 3 Restaurante pizzas, 2 garlic breads, and a 1.5-liter bottle of Pepsi Max, all for only £5.
With a lineup like that, there's no way you can lose.
Fill your freezer and win at summer with Iceland.
Subject to availability. See in store for details.
London North Eastern Railway is now operating Virgin Trains East Coast service. You'll see the name changing to LNER, but that'll be about the only difference you'll notice. You can rest assured that all existing Virgin Trains tickets will still be valid and the services are being maintained, so there'll be no need to rejig your travel plans. Visit lner.co.uk for details.
Clear a house, clear an office, clear a little bit, or clear loads of it. With Clearabee, getting rid of rubbish is quick, easy and affordable. Choose our man and van rubbish removal service and we'll come and clear almost any rubbish from almost anywhere. Because whatever you want rid of, there's a Clearabee man in a Clearabee van who can do it professionally and legally. Book now at clearabee.co.uk.
Clear rubbish easily. Clearabee.
The Nigel Farage Show on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
On the 11th of July, there is going to be a NATO summit, and it will be a very dramatic NATO summit. Why? Because President Trump is saying we need other European countries to start spending more money. Why should we do all the heavy lifting? And this was a point was backed up by Woody Johnson, the American ambassador in London. Now, defence is a real issue. NATO has a real problem. There is, I believe, a challenge from the new emerging European, Army, Air Force and Navy. But also, against this sort of backdrop, Mrs May this week refused to commit to retaining Britain's status as a Tier 1 military power. You've heard this figure 2% that's been talked about for some time, and that is the basic membership fee for NATO. Only 5 countries out of the 28 members are currently paying it. But the feeling is that to maintain Tier 1 status, we need to be spending nearer 3% than 2%. Now, the voice that you heard before the break was Gavin Williamson. He is, of course, the Defence Secretary. He is wildly ambitious, quite why I'm not actually sure. And it's reported today in the Mail on Sunday that in a meeting with senior military leaders, he said to May, that 20 billion you're going to spend, we need it for defence. And the quote that is attributed to him is, I made her so I can break her. Gosh, it all sounds like a film, doesn't it? I mean, did you know that Gavin Williamson was the most important man in this country? Clearly, he seems to think that he is. I do sometimes think some of these people are promoted above their ability. That's my view. Perhaps I'm being unkind. I don't know. Right. Why would a second referendum be good for this country? Graham is calling from Hay on Wye. Good morning, Graham.
Hello, Nigel. Good to talk to you.
Good to talk to you.
I don't believe in a second referendum. I'm a staunch Brexiteer, but I'd like it to be put to this Remain campaign, which basically it's nothing more than a stunt to try and get us to stop leaving the European Union.
Yes.
They call it in couch terms like a Brexit rather than nasty hard Brexit. I wonder if what they would say if someone says to them, OK, you want a real people's vote, let's make it, OK, do you accept what will probably be a rubbish deal? Or do you want to stay in the European Union? Or, for the disenfranchised people, millions of them, would you prefer to leave with a normal hard Brexit, no transition period, regaining control, saving ourselves £40 billion?
But we've already voted for that once, Graham, haven't we?
Exactly. But what would they say? Do you think they would say, OK, that will be fair, in the interest of democracy?
They would take their chances. They would take their chances, Graham. I mean, the only referendum I really want, Graham, is I'd love a referendum on whether we should maintain the House of Lords as it is. Now, that I would really thoroughly enjoy.
That would be interesting.
I mean, the House of Lords looks a bit like the European Union itself in many, many ways.
It's become part of the establishment.
Yeah.
What about the issue about democracy as well? There's stupid talk about, well, it's not a true democracy unless you're entitled to change your mind. How many times were we given the chance to change our mind over the last 40 years about Brexit?
41 years. 41 years, Graham. We had to wait.
It took a panicking Conservative government to get us a referendum.
Yes.
And I wonder how long it would be if we voted to remain, we'd get a chance to change our minds again.
Never.
Exactly.
Never.
I wouldn't be holding my breath.
Never. I mean, remember, Graham, over 400, I mean, this just shows you the gap in this country. Over 400 constituencies in this country voted Leave, and yet only 150 MPs represented the Leave side in the campaign. There is a chasm between the middle of the country and what's happening in London and Westminster. And my comment, Graham, which wasn't denied, is that when I looked at that crowd yesterday, they looked incredibly well-heeled, middle-class and overwhelmingly white. If I was to organise a protest march that was overwhelmingly white, I would be shouted down in the papers the next day for being against diversity. Slight double standards. Graham, thank you. Got to move on. John in Exeter. Good morning, John.
Hello, good morning, Nigel. Yes, I'm just calling to say it would be a terrible idea to have another referendum because the matter is already out of the control of the UK. Under the Article 50 process, and although there's been some UK lawyers saying, oh, you can revoke it unilaterally, the EU side has said, oh, no, you can't revoke it unilaterally. We can put conditions. And, your colleague, Mr. Verhofstadt, has said, no, if Britain wants to stay, that's great, but, we have to look again at all your opt-outs. You have to look again at your rebate.
The rebate's
gone,
again
at this and that. Obviously, the rebate would go in, but the opt-outs as well, opt-outs from the Euro, opt-outs from Schengen. They would strip all of that out. They're not going to agree to an extension to the Article 50 timeline, because there's the European elections coming up, and there's going to be a big, struggle over who's going to be the European Commissioner, whether it's going to be someone...
What do you mean, John, they wouldn't want me standing in the next set of European elections?
Well, no.
Because that's what it would mean.
Next European. I think that there's going to be... Because you can see on the continent, there's this big power struggle on the right over the issue of immigration.
Yep.
With the CSU and the CDU
and the AFD
and the AFD and
what's happening, John? Actually,
Salvini
is the AFD are changing German politics and changing the whole debate in Germany, just as UKIP did in this country.
Yeah, and I think what will happen is that the whole Spitzenkandidaten process, with the appointment, that there will be a big struggle between those faction, between Mr. Kurz and Mr. Orban and the others on one side, and people like Mr. Macron and Mr. Verhofstadt on the other side, over who gets to be the head of the Commission and who gets to control the Parliament. And one side of that is going to want to make sure that all of the UK MEPs are out before the next European election.
Yes, although they're going to be in for a shock, John. I mean, with or without the United Kingdom, and I think it'll be without, I do think that the European elections in May next year are going to see a European Parliament very much more Eurosceptic than anything we've seen before. Do you know, when I first bowled up there in 1999, there were literally a handful of us. Out of 650 then, literally about 5 of us in the whole place who were Eurosceptics. Yeah. And I think after the next European election, it could be a lot bigger. John, I thank you. Yeah. Let's go to Kathy, up in the Borders, Hawick in the Borders. Hi.
Hello.
Good morning. So, Kathy, would a second referendum be a good thing for our country?
Well, my view is that we should have a second referendum, but because I voted on the basis of 42 years living under the EU yoke, as I like to say to my Remainer husband, because I was brought up in Islington, I think the next referendum should take place in another 42 years.
Right. OK, that's pretty much the line I'm taking too. OK, so the answer is yes, Gina Miller, you can have your referendum. There's absolutely no problem at all. We were thinking about 2055 might be quite a good time to do it.
My only problem with this is that if we said, right, there's going to be another referendum, they would take hope and glory from it and constantly try to bring it forward. So you're sort of throwing them a bite, but that they would want to sort of make it, a bigger bite. So you'd have to deal with that, Nigel.
Yeah, no, fine, Kathy. I like your tongue-in-cheek answer to that question. Thank you very much. Let's go to Mark in Chertsey. Mark, hello.
Morning, Nigel.
Good morning. So, there's a lot of people arguing here that voters didn't understand what they were voting on, that the deal is going to be different to what people anticipated, and that democracy is a process that keeps on evolving.
I mean, it's ridiculous. We had a vote. We had a democratic vote. It went on for months and months. Both sides had their arguments, and we voted. We voted to leave. I mean, are we going to have a third, a fourth, a fifth? Are we going to play Skittles and see who wins that, and then maybe they can decide sort of which way it goes? Of course we shouldn't have another referendum. I mean, these are the same people that have been banging on for 2 years. The Adonises, the Campbells, the Gina Millers. Yep. They just want to reverse Brexit. That's all they want. I don't know why they're trying to come out with this new people's vote. It won't be a people's vote. They just want to reverse Brexit.
Yeah, that's why I said, Mark, that Vince Cable was totally honest about it. He wants an exit from Brexit. And the rest are dressing it up, aren't they, in all sorts of different ways. They even, Mark, say to us that they respect the result of the referendum. Really?
Of course they don't. They don't respect the referendum at all. And I was saying yesterday, I mean, if we don't leave next year, can you imagine the amount of people that will be coming out on the streets of London? People that voted leave. It won't be 100,000.
No, if you want to see a real protest, then I suggest Parliament, what you do is make sure we don't leave on March the 29th next year, and then we'll show them how angry, genuinely angry people would be. Mark,
absolutely.
I totally agree with that. I mean, I'm just of the view, Mark, I think it's all been handled appallingly. There is a lack of vision from the Prime Minister. But I do think, given that the EU withdrawal bill is now off to get royal assent, It would be suicide for the Labour or Conservative parties to say we're going to stop the Article 50 process. Neither of them could win an election if they did that. And I still think, Mark, for those reasons, that we will leave on March the 29th next year, but have many years of tidying up to do afterwards.
I mean, I haven't been happy with the way we've negotiated our exit, but at the end of the day, it's still, I would say, better to keep the Conservatives in power because they still are saying that we're going to leave the European Union.
Yes, our Remainer voting Prime Minister is assuring us that Brexit means Brexit. It's not totally convincing, but hey, there we are. Mark, I thank you. I thank all of you. Right, well, now, coming up in the next hour, which member of Donald Trump's team has become the latest victim of a Liberal protest whilst out having dinner with her family? I'll give you my take on that because I've got some experience of things like that. We'll also look at the weather. It feels like a barbecue summer. Talks today could be the biggest pub takings in history. John Ketley will tell us what's coming up in the next few weeks and perhaps even longer. He may even predict the football result. Who knows? But first, Emmanuel Macron has called for EU countries which refuse to take in migrants to be fined. Another example of, frankly, Europe now beginning to tear itself apart. Meanwhile, in the US, Trump's tough stance has won the backing of many in the country. I want to know, who's right on immigration, Europe or Trump?
On your radio, on your phone, and here.
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation, this is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 11 o'clock, there's to be a consultation on a range of ideas to halve childhood obesity in England by 2030. Public Health England is recommending the government bans the sale of energy drinks to children, including a 9 o'clock in the evening watershed on junk food adverts. Health Minister Steve Bryan has told LBC schools aren't playing their part.
We don't think they are, but we don't think children are doing enough to be active and healthy across the board. And if we're going to do that, then we have to be serious about prevention. There's all the treatments that go on, also the cancer minister, but we've got to get with prevention.
Police in Germany say 25 people have been injured, 4 seriously, after an explosion. It happened in the western city of Wuppertal. Emergency services say the explosion affected a multi-storey building. Police were at a community centre in East London after a 15-year-old boy was stabbed to death as he left a party. LBC's Patrick Hildred is at the scene in Romford.
A mass brawl broke out at around 9 o'clock last night and the boy who was stabbed died at the scene. Zubair Chowdhury lives in a flat nearby and says he could hear the screams.
I was watching upstairs and then police came 15-20 minutes late when fight goes on. And then everybody was screaming, and you know how the kids are. They just keep screaming and then running around, all sorts of things going on.
The 3 male teenagers who have been arrested on suspicion of murder are being questioned at separate police stations across East London. Patrick Hildred, LBC in Romford.
The Health Secretary is criticising Airbus UK for making, in his words, completely inappropriate threats over Britain's Brexit plans. Jeremy Hunt says the country needs to ignore so-called siren voices and support the Prime Minister. It follows Airbus UK last week warning it may quit the UK if there's a no-deal Brexit. Polls have opened in Turkey's presidential and parliamentary elections. The country is transitioning to a new executive presidential system, which was approved in a controversial referendum last year. Journalist Michael Daventry, an expert on Turkish affairs, has told Nigel why the country is in this position.
The European Union was, for Turkey back in the day, actually a very good thing. Turkey did such things as abolishing the death penalty or to do, boring but important policies like introducing housing ombudsmen. But the EU has taken its eye off the ball of Turkey for a multitude of reasons. That's contributed to the situation that Turkey is in today.
The first train on the East Coast Main Line since it was taken back under public control has left Newcastle this morning on time. It follows the failure of the Virgin Trains East Coast franchise. It's now called London North Eastern Railway. Bridget Nielsen has given birth at the age of 54. The model and actress and her husband say they welcome their daughter in Los Angeles, weighing 5 pounds 9 ounces. LBC weather, blue skies and sunshine, a high of 25 degrees. From Global's newsroom, for LBC, I'm Philip Chrysikos.
You know your business, what it needs, what keeps you up at night, and what gets you fired up every morning. You know where you want to be in 5 years' time, and that you really want to be there in 2. We know we can help you get there. Barclays now offers unsecured loans of up to £100,000 that can be with you in days or even hours to help move your business forward. To apply for a loan that's just right for your business, search Barclays Business Loans. Let's go forward. Subject to status, terms and conditions apply, guarantee may be needed.
LBC Travel in Wandsworth, the South Circular Upper Richmond Road stays closed westbound because of roadworks at the A3 West Hill, so all traffic has to go down West Hill instead. In Bexley Heath, Arnsberg Way is closed in both directions because of a parade between Albion Way and Graham Road. The recuse in Paddington on Marylebone Road eastbound. There's a lane blocked because a coach has broken down at Lisson Grove. A burst water main in Kensal Green means Scrubs Lane is closed in both directions between Harrow Road and Waldo Road. And on the rails, there's no service on Eurostar at St Pancras because of overhead power cable problems. LBC Travel, I'm Dave Goff.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. The Nigel Farage Show.
There is one issue that is dominating the politics across the West at the moment, and it is immigration, both in the European Union and, of course, in America too. Oddly, on this second anniversary of us getting the result of the Brexit referendum, a result in which immigration played a massive, crucial part. Oddly, there's almost no debate in this country about immigration at all at the moment, but there is elsewhere. And perhaps symbolic of this are the 230 migrants involved in a standoff between Italy and the charities which rescued them from the waters off Libya. They're on board a boat called Lifeline. It's run by a German aid group. Neither Italy nor Malta will allow the boat to dock. And there's a crisis meeting in Brussels today. The official summit of European leaders does not take place until Thursday. That's one that Mrs May, of course, will be at. But there's a crisis meeting today taking place in Brussels, which has been boycotted by the Hungarians, by the Slovaks, by the Czechs, by the Hungarians. They've boycotted it because they're sick to death of being told they must take migrant quotas. And adding to their anger is Monsieur Macron, whose idea of EU reform is to centralise power even more greatly, and he wants to put a system in fines in place if people don't take their fair share as he sees it. Now, in many ways, the person that is leading this new rebellion is the Lega, the League, Italian political party's leader, Matteo Salvini. He's the Interior Minister. This is his latest comment on the migrant crisis.
My task is to defend the borders of this wonderful country, which cannot become a refugee camp. Therefore, those who have the right to enter Italy will enter Italy. For everyone else, there are Spanish harbours, French harbours, Maltese harbours, Dutch harbours.
So Italy has had enough, and, you know, you've got a new coalition between these two parties, the Five Star and the League, and they are now talking very tough on this subject. They've simply had enough. And in Germany, fascinatingly, Mrs Merkel, who has been the dominant European politician of the modern era, she has a problem because, remember, back in 2015, after Mr Juncker had launched the EU's migration policy, which basically was that if you come across the Mediterranean by whatever means and set foot on EU soil, basically you'll be allowed to stay. And I was fiercely critical of Juncker at that time in the European Parliament. I said it was a crazy policy that would play into the hands of the criminal trafficking organisations, that would risk people's lives. And I said at the time we should look at Australia, who faced a very similar problem with boats headed to Australia, people drowning, and the Australians said, look, we are not going to take a single refugee unless you've been processed somewhere else, and we've made that decision somewhere else, and the boats stopped coming and the drowning stopped. And Mrs Merkel, of course, compounded all of this by saying, we can cope. As many as want to come, and guess what? 1.4 million went to Germany, and it has totally changed German attitudes and German politics. It's led directly to the rise of the AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland. They, in turn, putting massive pressure on the Bavarian Conservatives, who are known as the CSU, without whom Mrs Merkel can't govern. And the battle, really, that is going on inside the European Union is this. Should decisions about immigration, about how you deal with illegals, how you qualify or recognise refugees, should these decisions be taken by the European Union, or should these decisions be taken by nation states? And that really is at the heart of this whole debate. And unless Mrs Merkel somehow can satisfy her coalition partners in Bavaria, who incidentally are saying, we will not take anybody into Germany who's already been processed in another European country, which actually, if you go right the way back to the Geneva Convention on all of this, was recognised for many years to be fair under international law. Unless unless somehow a compromise is found, Merkel will be gone, and there'll be fresh elections in Germany, and the AfD will get even stronger. And in America, of course, Trump has had, I think, it's been the hottest week in many ways since he became the president. A zero-tolerance policy on immigration, illegal immigration coming up through the Mexican border, and, of course, the policy of separating children and parents, leading to a huge outcry, leading to Trump saying, no, we're going to change that. Families will be kept together, but America is going to maintain its zero tolerance. We're not going to be a soft touch. What fascinates me is everybody is saying that Trump and America are cruel and heartless in the way in which they're dealing with this, but somehow the Europeans are soft and cuddly. Well, I don't think so, and let me tell you why. Last year, we know that 5,000 people drowned crossing the Mediterranean. The year before that, it was a similar number. Some estimates are that as over 30,000 people have died in the last few years trying to get into Europe. And I would actually argue that Trump's policy leads to far less human suffering than that of the European Union. I'm sure that, as a view, will provoke some debate. Steve is on the line from Hemel Hempstead. Good morning, Steve.
Hi, Nigel.
Hi there.
Hi. You asked the question whether Europe's got it right on immigration or Donald Trump.
Yes.
And the simple answer, 1,000%, is Donald Trump's got it right. This whole argument is based on the 2,000 children locked up and not being with their families, which I guess is not a nice thing.
Yep.
But what they don't tell you is the 63,000 Americans that have been killed in the last 15 years by illegal immigration, by illegal immigrants.
Yes.
Through drugs, through drink driving, etc. Now, that is over 10 times more people that have died in America in the last 15 years than died in Iraq and Afghanistan. To give you some idea. So
that is an amazing figure, Steve. I mean, I know that I know that Trump often parades with the families of those who've been murdered by illegal immigrants. I have to say, I don't know whether your figure's right or not. Clearly,
they are right.
Okay, fine, Steve.
They're right. I watched the programme, law enforcement officers, etc., all these victims. This is factual. This is factual figures.
Frankly, Steve, whether it is factual, whether it's much smaller, the point is this has been happening, and Trump has made that a political issue.
Yes.
But many, Steve, would say, and I'm hearing it, that Trump is a cold, heartless monster, and some. I mean, I listened to a BBC radio programme yesterday morning where somebody was commenting and saying, well, if you look at the language of Trump and his behaviour, and it's there in the Observer today, some suggesting that Trump may lead us to the next Holocaust.
Well, it's a shame that the BBC didn't worry a bit more about Jimmy Savile over the last 50 years. Well, it's true. It's true. Okay. I mean, we all know what the BBC are like. I mean, I don't watch them anymore. I suggest the best thing we can do, because you've been talking about referendums this morning.
Yep.
And all that sort of stuff. No, I've got the solution to all this. It's a binary vote. We vote whether we want to keep open-door immigration in this country as it is, or we want to stop it by...
Now, that'd be a good referendum, Steve, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I wonder what the answer would be.
Yeah, I think I know.
48-52,
no.
Or maybe 80-20.
Well, 70-30 anyway. Steve, thank you. I'm going to move on. I'm going to go to Bill in Faversham. Good morning, Bill.
Hello there, Nigel. I'm genuinely getting confused with what the Western leaders in Europe want.
Yes.
Because if we were to actually, let's just go along with it. Let's drop all controls, all border controls, everything, and just let the poor people from the Sudan, who I don't blame, by the way, let them just come in their millions. Now, here's my question. In this country, we already cannot keep up with the house building that's required. There are homeless in all of those Western European countries. Do we draw the line at 10 million, 50 million, 100 million, because there are hundreds of millions of people that, because of war and other displacements, would love to come to Europe.
Yeah, I mean, Bill,
where do we draw the line?
Bill, the UNHCR produced a figure that they estimated up to 60 million people were displaced through war or political oppression. So, I mean, it's literally impossible to deal with on that scale, isn't it?
Absolutely. Well, nobody could deal with that. And in fact, here's the bizarre thing. If you were to follow this through to its logical conclusion, it would turn the Western European capitals into the very thing the people are running from.
Yes, and that's a cultural argument, Bill, that gets made. Those that make it, of course, get screamed at and called horrible, horrible names. Look, Bill, I understand where you're coming from. Thank you. I'm going to rattle through a few calls here. David is calling from Uxbridge. Good morning, David.
Yeah, hi, Nigel. I think it's more complicated than saying it's either Macron or Trump.
David, of course it's always nuanced, but what I was trying to do was to show people that actually we think, the EU are nice and soft and cuddly, but actually their ridiculous policies are leading to many thousands drowning and being killed.
Sure, and I partly agree with that, maybe for different. But I think the policies of somebody like Macron, who's an I would say, neoliberalist, globalist, actually causes both in his liberal intervention war policies and also the economic policies cause a lot of the problems both in the global south and at places like Africa and at home with a sort of precarity. You get like low skill, low-wage jobs, and then people in precarious, who do we blame? We blame, because I can't get an appointment with a doctor, so I'll blame immigrants. So there's a narrative like that. But also, like Macron's policies are, while he's more, as I say, he comes over as being a humanitarian, and he actually is quite problematic and... and you have to look at something as well, like, say, it's like the wars, but it's also things like climate change. There's going to be parts of Africa, there's going to be parts of southern Europe that are going to be uninhabitable.
Well, we'll see about that, David. I've heard a lot of warnings about that. So it may be true. David, the one thing I will say is that if Macron really wanted to help people from black Africa and the Third World, what he would do is change the European Union's policy where they literally devastate the seas off West Africa with European fleets catching fish in huge quantities. And, of course, we put massive tariffs on vegetables, goods coming from poor African countries. If the EU was sincere, it could do a lot to help Africa. I've seen it do almost nothing. David, I thank you. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here, live on LBC, and it's now 11:15.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast, every weekday morning from 7, only on LBC.
Former director of the FBI, who bizarrely was fired, effectively by watching a TV screen as he was talking with some of his colleagues. James Comey is my special guest. Out of 10, what would you rate Trump as a president?
1 or 2, probably 1. We've had worse presidents.
Who's worse?
Well, Andrew Johnson was the president after Abraham Lincoln, and Andrew Johnson was a raving racist.
Obama?
My vision on him was mostly through the national security lens, and so I put him up around 8.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast.
With The Times. Be not just informed, but well informed.
The John Lewis clearance is now on. There are thousands of great offers across all your favourite brands, from kitchen and homeware to fashion and beauty, as well as expert advice from John Lewis partners and a minimum 2-year guarantee on all our electricals. Visit John Lewis or shop online and get more of what you love for less. John Lewis clearance, now on.
From the age of 3, young Mozart would watch his sister play the harpsichord with their father, mesmerised by the sound. An early obsession from which his love of music blossomed. At Darwood & Tanner, we believe obsession is a good thing. It's what motivates us to create the perfect smile for every patient, day after day. Darwood & Tanner, your smile is our healthy obsession. Visit darwoodandtanner.co.uk.
An amazing kitchen, an amazing bathroom, an amazing hallway. At Amazing Tiles, our range of porcelain, ceramic and bespoke tiles can make any home amazing. Right now, buy 5 metres or more of plain tiles and get 1/3 off the retail price. Visit our showroom and warehouse at Park Royal Road, London, or call 0208 83 84 900. Make your home amazing at amazingtiles.com.
You have 47 new messages.
Hi, honey, it's me, your husband, Pete, again. I honestly thought if we used purple bricks to sell the house, we'd have to do it all ourselves. I didn't know they can do everything for you and have a 5-star rating on Trustpilot from over 40,000 reviews. Anyway, it would be great if you could change the locks back. It's getting pretty nippy out here.
Oh, Peter, you silly Billy. Save yourself from commisery at purplebricks.co.uk.
Fixed fee payable on instruction or after 10 months viewing service costs extra. See website for more details.
That's a Swale Heating engineer setting off to help another customer. We have over 250 highly qualified engineers on hand 24 hours a day, 365 days a year to deal with your boiler installations and emergency breakdowns. Visit swaleheating.com. Rely on us to keep you warm.
Do you or your business own a property with planning permission opportunities or land with development potential? If so, Barnes Rofe can help you manage the risks and maximise your gain with joint venture contracts, development partnerships, property SPVs, financing and ownership structures and property tax advice. At Barnes Rofe, we've already supported our clients through property deals worth millions. So call us today and you can be next. Barnes Rofe, clever accountants for property businesses.
The best place for sleepyheads is in a Bridge bedding bed.
At Bridge Bedding, we have hundreds of beds and mattresses in stock from the biggest brands in the UK. We'll beat any price on a like-for-like basis and we'll deliver for free. So before you buy your next new bed, visit a Bridge Bedding Centre, Rectory Groveley-on-Sea, Upminster Road, Hornchurch, or online at bridgebedding.com.
The best place for sleepyheads is in a Bridge bedding bed.
The Nigel Farage Show on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
The issue of immigration is changing Western world politics, and there's a big summit going on in Brussels today. A lot of people saying that, frankly, they've had enough of huge numbers of people coming into their countries. But Macron saying, no, we must do this together as a unified Europe. And please, if you think it would be better for the EU to deal with migration as one bloc and not let, to quote, selfish nationalisms get in the way, then let me know 10345 6060 973. And what of Trump? You know, has he got the policies right in America, or is it just too tough? Is it just been too brutal? Before I get to that, interesting. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, she's the White House press spokeswoman. You see her on the screens and hear her on the radio on a very regular basis. Very competent woman. And she found herself on Friday kicked out of a restaurant, the Red Hen restaurant in Lexington, Virginia. And that followed on from Homeland Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen, who was having dinner in a Mexican restaurant last week, and a mob came in, this is in Washington, D.C., and started booing and jeering. And it looked to me like Sarah Huckabee Sanders was a bit shocked, actually, at being kicked out of a restaurant. Don't worry, Sarah. There are lots of restaurants, lots of pubs, and lots of coffee bars in Brussels that will not serve me. Why? Because they think I'm actually, in the end, going to bring the whole temple crashing down around their ears, and they'll lose their well-paid jobs. And you know what? Actually, they might just be right. But I've been subject to some of this, and I've had, my children put in a position by so-called democratic protesters that they shouldn't be. And I'm sorry to say, folks, but this is part of the new intolerance. However much those on the right disagree with those on the left, they might send a nasty tweet, they might say something unpleasant, but they don't organise mob rule or violence against them. I'm afraid that there is a new left out there, and it is deeply, deeply intolerant. And what a pleasure it was on Friday. I sat down and did a 10 to 15-minute debate with Ken Clarke. And do you know something? I disagree with Ken completely on the European Union, on the role of the state, on immigration, on grammar schools, on a whole host of things. I disagree completely with Ken Clarke. And yet, do you know something? We had a proper debate and we chatted afterwards, and that's the way democracy should be conducted. We should respect the fact that other people have different points of view. Goodness me, it's what people fought world wars for us to have that freedom. There's too little of it. So, who's getting immigration right? The European Union or Trump? Let's ask Steve in Croydon what he thinks. Good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. It seems ironic to me that we could end up leaving the European Union, we will end up leaving the European Union, on the matter of immigration, which I believe was really, in most people's mind, the main reason for the yes vote to leave. And then it could be ironic that we'll end up leaving the European Union just before the European Union decide to deal with immigration in the way that would have been acceptable to the UK. And I don't believe that you can have immigration without integration. And I spent 9 months in Hamburg, and there are parts of Hamburg that are Turkey. They have Turkish flags. Everybody speaks Turkish. It's like being in a
but Steve, come on. I had this debate with Lord Mandelson during the referendum. I said we've turned vast parts of our, not vast parts, but many of our towns and cities, have got districts within them that are unrecognisable. I was told that these are the benefits by Lord Mandelson of multiculturalism, and that to speak out against that made me a very extreme and bad person.
But was he talking from his gated community of white people, which Tony Blair obviously does?
Yeah, quite. No, I mean, it is a huge issue. Steve, I tell you what, where you're slightly wrong, and that is that the common asylum policy that the European Union, Mr Juncker put into place in 2015, which Merkel reinforced, we were not part of anyway, all right? The issue for us, although those that come into European countries within 4, 5, 6 years get EU passports and could then, as an EU member, have come to Britain, the real issue for us, Steve, I think, even above and beyond that, was the free movement question. And the one thing I can promise you is the European Union would rather disappear in a puff of smoke than give up their principle of the free movement of people. It is not going to be reformed. It is not going to be changed.
I accept that. And a final point from me then would be that Angela Merkel, rather like Tony Blair, stood there and said, I personally, Angela Merkel, I would like to throw the doors open to 1 million people. She did that. But if you had a referendum now in Germany and said, do you want free movement of people? Would that be yes or would that be no?
It'd be a no. But equally, Steve, had there been a referendum in Germany 20 years ago on giving up the Deutschmark for the euro, we know what the result would have been. And in a sense, that is why this AfD movement Steve has got going, is the German people have been ignored by Berlin for far, far, far too long. Thank you, Steve, for your call. Richard thinks that Trump's policy is correct. It's time the European governments cease their bonkers open-door policy. Well, there is change in the wind, Richard, but exactly where this will go, I don't know. I do actually genuinely begin to think that Merkel simply cannot survive that catastrophic decision that she made. But there we are, we'll see. Charlotte is calling from the Forest of Dean. Good morning, Charlotte.
Good morning, Nigel.
So, who has got the kinder policy? Is it this evil man Trump or the cuddly European Commission?
Well, as you know, because I ring in here regularly.
Yeah, we've spoken before,
I'm a big supporter of the Donald, and I fully support what Trump is saying this week and what he has said about immigration. He's had a pop at Angela Merkel and the disastrous immigration policies, and I think it takes somebody like Trump, who's removed from the European project, to come out and say, look at the disaster that is Europe.
But the optics,
Charlotte, going on over there.
But the optics, Charlotte, of separated children weren't good. You know, I was in New York last week, and it was very interesting. It wasn't just the Democrats saying this looks wrong and feels wrong. Actually, many of his own Republican Party said this looks wrong and feels wrong.
Yes, but it's been a policy that's been in place, and the Democrats brought it in. It's a bit hypocritical, isn't it?
Yeah, funny enough, Charlotte.
Clinton brought it in, Obama brought it in. I mean, who's a hypocrite here?
Funny enough, Charlotte, if a family, including children, try illegally to get into the United Kingdom, you never guess what we do. We would separate the parents and the children. So there was a bit of anti-Trumpism here, and that's why he did change that policy, which is probably the wise thing to do. But what do you think Europe should do, Charlotte? I mean, we've got this human tide coming across the Mediterranean, thousands drowning. What should the European Union do in the face of this?
Well, the European Union aren't going to do anything. If there was anybody with the kahunas of Donald Trump who could stand up and basically say, send them back, turn the boats round and send them back to Libya, and chuck them off and put signs up everywhere saying basically you are not coming into Europe. If you get on a boat and come here, we will turn you away and you will come back. And it would stop. I mean, if we stopped giving, and not only that, the freebies have got to stop, Nigel. The freebies have got to stop. The hand over fist grovelling of giving these people houses over the indigenous population who need housing. And I'm not just talking about the UK, I'm talking about Europe in general. You know, you've got to stop giving these people handouts, because that's why they're coming. You know, they think they're on a free ride here, and this is why so many people are so angry, Nigel.
They are. No, Charlotte, many people are, thank you. Although Jim says to me, why are Brexit voters all scared of anybody foreign? Trace back through our ancestry, and the majority of us are descended of immigrants. It's all about scale, Jim, isn't it? It's all about scale. You know, I mean, outside of wartime, if you look at the sheer numbers that came to Britain from 1066 until 1997, in sheer numbers, it was tiny compared to what's come here since 1997. And arguably, in some years, there'd been more people coming into the United Kingdom that had come in all the previous centuries added up together. So it is very much about scale. Trump is right for a major reason. The president's first duty is to protect his people. That's not what the EU's been doing, and they've been putting their people in harm's way. All of those attacks, France, Germany, the UK, come to mind, says Chris. Well, you know, the one thing I think that is changing politics is the fact that of those 8 men who committed those barbarous atrocities in Paris a few years ago, 5 of them had come back into the European continent posing as migrants, and that is fundamentally changing politics. I think what the European Union needs to do is to say, look, we will give genuine refugee status to those who qualify. Because when you see that 70% of those that are coming are young men between 18 and 30, frankly, most of them wouldn't qualify as refugees. We will give refugee status to some people, but all of this will be processed outside the European Union. And that, I think, if they did that, then possibly the drownings would end. But at the moment, thousands of people are drowning every year, and effectively, we're all just turning a blind eye to it, which I find quite remarkable. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. It is now 11:30 and time for the news with Philip Chrysikos.
The Mayor of London says police are out in force in East London after a 15-year-old boy was stabbed to death following a birthday party. Sadiq Khan says anyone involved in what happened in Romford last night will be brought to justice. Police in Germany say 25 people have been injured, 4 severely, in an explosion. It destroyed a multi-storey building in the western city of Wuppertal. The government will consult on a ban on selling energy drinks to children and mandatory calorie labelling on restaurant menus. The proposals by Public Health England is to halve childhood obesity by 2030. LBC weather, blue skies and sunshine, a high of 25 degrees.
LBC travel is slow in Wandsworth. The South Circular Upper Richmond Road stays closed westbound because of roadworks at the A3 West Hill, so all traffic has to go down West Hill instead. A parade in Bexley Heath means Arnsberg Way is closed both ways between Albion Way and Graham Road. In central London, a procession is gathering at Hyde Park, which will head to Trafalgar Square at midday. The route will take it down Piccadilly, Haymarket and Pall Mall East. In Haringey, Uplands Road is closed because of a police investigation between Ridge Road and Weston Park. And on the rails, there's no service on Eurostar at St Pancras. It's because of overhead power cable problems. LBC Travel, I'm Dave Goff.
Follow the historic royal tour of the Middle East, all next week on LBC.
You know your business, what it needs, what keeps you up at night, and what gets you fired up every morning. You know where you want to be in 5 years' time, and that you really want to be there in 2. We know we can help you get there. Barclays now offers unsecured loans of up to £100,000 that can be with you in days or even hours to help move your business forward. To apply for a loan that's just right for your business, search Barclays Business Loans. Let's go forward. Subject to status, terms and conditions apply, guarantee may be needed.
Love your skin, love your hair, love your nails. Perfectil delivers nutritional support from within, including zinc, to help you maintain normal skin, hair and nails. Perfectil, the science of beauty, from Vitabiotics, the UK's #1 vitamin company. From Boots,
pharmacies and vitibiotics.com.
That's a Swale heating engineer setting off to help another customer. We have over 250 highly qualified engineers on hand 24 hours a day, 365 days a year to deal with your boiler installations and emergency breakdowns. Visit swaleheating.com. Rely on us to keep you warm.
Landlords, Direct Line guarantees to beat other insurers' renewal premiums for the same cover. Can your insurance do that? Switch to Direct Line Landlord. New customers only. Qualifying criteria apply. Underwritten by UK Insurance Limited.
On the evening of Tuesday the 3rd, my husband and I were discussing how best to sell our house. I told him Purple Bricks make you do it all yourself. That was fake news. Purple Bricks can do everything from viewings to negotiating your sale. For this, I would like to apologise to my husband unreservedly. We request privacy at this difficult time. Thank you.
Oh dear, oh dear. Save yourself from commisery at purplebricks.co.uk.
Fixed fee payable on instruction or after 10 months viewing service costs extra. See website for more details.
How do you think England are going to do this summer, Bob?
I don't know, John, but I've got a good feeling about Iceland. They're demonstrating an impressive 3-2-1 formation.
That's right. 3 Restaurante pizzas, 2 garlic breads, and a 1.5-liter bottle of Pepsi Max. All for only £5.
With a lineup like that, there's no way you can lose.
Fill your freezer and win at summer with Iceland.
Subject to availability. See in-store for details.
London North Eastern Railway is now operating Virgin Trains East Coast service. You'll see the name changing to LNER, but that'll be about the only difference you'll notice. You can rest assured that all existing Virgin Trains tickets will still be valid and the services are being maintained, so there'll be no need to rejig your travel plans. Visit lner.co.uk for details.
Leading Britain's conversation. The Nigel Farage Show. Tweet at LBC using the hashtag #FarageOnLBC.
It's very difficult for any government to win when it comes to dealing with illegal immigration, who should be allowed to stay, who is a refugee, who isn't. Trump has got big battles with it on the Mexican border, and the European Union, boy, have certainly got it with those that have been crossing the Mediterranean for the last few years. And I'm asking, who has got the best approach? The European Union or Donald Trump? Before that, you know, whenever you hear the SAS, it conjures up these amazing stories, you know, and one thinks of the Andy McNab books, and very often people use the SAS as an analogy for something. Who dares wins, and they are a completely extraordinary elite unit. They were founded back in the desert by an eccentric called David Sterling, who had this idea. He'd get a sort of group of irregulars together who would go long distances across the desert and blow up aeroplanes, and on that went. David Sterling led it. It was then taken over by a guy called Paddy Mayne, one of the most decorated soldiers in all of history. And I'd naturally assumed that this tiny group of people who'd got together in 1942 were all dead. But one of them's still alive. His name is Mike Sadler. There, right from the very start, fought through some amazing, incredible battles. And he was made on Friday a Chevalier of the Légion d'Honneur in France. And I reckon that's pretty remarkable that there is just one person left from the SAS. And you know what? What was it all for? Free speech and debate, and accepting that other people have different points of view without getting too upset about it. Analia is calling me from Clapton. Good morning.
Hello, Nigel. How are you?
I'm very well. So, have the European... Is the EU doing the right thing in accepting people who come across the Mediterranean?
No, in my opinion, there is no perfect situation on either side.
No, there isn't.
And I massively disagree with what is happening with the United States to the point where, you know, this is beyond belief. That's my opinion. Because
what do you disagree with, particularly?
Well, my main concern is that as a result of this policy, and whoever before was talking to you saying that this policy was in place even before with the Obama administration. The policy was in place. However, the main difference is that this policy was not applied up to the point where it was only applied when obviously you have a convict or criminal crossing the border. This is the main difference.
Yes. What they've done is they're basically saying in America now, as part of their zero-tolerance policy, that anyone who crosses the border without the right paperwork is themselves a criminal.
Absolutely, and that's the main difference. The crossing the border on its own is not a felony. It's not a misdemeanor, and at the moment, every single family is treated in the same way. This is, to me, this is absolutely unacceptable, and there are more clever ways to deal with this influx of immigration. There are many rural parts of America where, immigrants could be placed, they could work on land, they can work on agriculture, or, I'm sure there are, many things that could be, thought of.
But I would say this to you, the estimates are, who knows with estimates, but the estimates are there are between 10 and 20 million illegal immigrants in America. And isn't the point here that people being allowed to come into America illegally and work, etc., isn't that grossly unfair to the tens of millions of people who've gone into America, gone through the hoops and done the whole thing legally? Isn't it unfair to them, including many Mexicans?
Well, that's a good point, because then in this case, I think it should be looked at how people were dealt with previously, and if this was done correctly, at a certain point, this is the way that it should be dealt now at the moment. Obviously, immigration is a difficult issue, but I watched the protest of the Senate the other night, and there were absolutely horrible examples of every single case. These people have been there in place, they visited the facilities, and the things that, are coming out, at the moment are absolutely horrendous, for anyone who is listening. That my main concern as a result of this policy is that children who have been staying in the facilities for a long time, at some point they're offered for adoption, or they're offered to the so-called sponsors, who are people absolutely unknown, who they're saying, oh, we've tested these people, they're fine to take the children away. Who are these sponsors? This creates a perfect situation for human trafficking. A lot of these children will be able to be traced back.
Well, that may be true, but where we have human trafficking on an industrial scale are the people coming across from Libya.
Well, I would not put anyone under the same line. Similarly, a lot of Syrian refugees were placed, for example, in Italy. There were towns that they had which were less populated, and there were certain people that were able to find a place for them. So maybe this should be looked at in a more clever way. The U.S. is a vast territory. I'm not saying that every single person should be placed, but I would rather have a whole family deported together rather than break a family and take a child away.
And isn't that why, Analia, Trump listened and changed policy this week?
He has not changed the policy. The policy, actually, if you obviously you're aware of a lot of things, the policy has not been changed for good. What he said just the other day is that this is just a temporary solution, and the families would not be, the policy would not be indefinite. So the policy has not been reversed 100% completely. He said that also there will be no guarantee for the children who have already been separated. There is no guarantee that they will be reunited 100% with their parents. The American Pediatric Association stated that such a separation can have lifelong effects.
So why did the parents put their children through all this risk?
I don't think anyone has expected the scale of that. People have not been at the legal entry points at the border. People have not been even allowed to get to the bridge crossing. They've been returned numerous times away, where say, okay, if you cross the border illegally, then we apply this policy to you. But actually, this happens exactly to people who are crossing the border illegally, and they're lawfully asking for entry.
I tell you what, Analia, this issue's not going away, is it? It really isn't. Listen, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts. Something I agree with very strongly here on Twitter. In World War II, it was all done properly. Women and children only evacuated to return when safe to do so. The men stayed and fought. Today, perversely, we see 70% plus male migrants coming in with far fewer of the truly vulnerable women and children. Very wrong indeed. I, very controversially, to some, in the referendum, used that big poster of the line of people rushing to get in to answer Merkel's call, saying the EU has failed us all. And you look at that picture, there weren't many women, there There weren't any children. There weren't any old people. That is what's been happening. James is calling from New Zealand. Is it Kataya? Is that how I pronounce it, James?
Yes, Nigel, yes. It's Kataya.
Kataya. Well, good morning. Give us a view from completely the other side of the world.
Well, it's a bit of irony here. I live in a country that's an island, and it actually has quite strong immigration controls.
Yes.
And we've already got a Labour government in control at the moment, which is actually cutting down the number of migrants coming to the country. So it's a little bit different here.
Yes, well, of course, but you've also got Winston Peters, haven't you, in that coalition, who very much like Trump's America First takes a New Zealand First approach, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to Winnie and spoke about you, actually, Nigel. But yes, but Labour in its own manifesto was actually going to bring down that, and that was because I think over here politicians, unlike the UK, are a bit more in touch with the average person.
So if I landed, James, if I landed illegally in New Zealand on a boat that had come from... I have to have travelled a fair way, I grant you, but if I landed illegally in New Zealand, what would happen to me?
Well, you wouldn't probably get too far. You would get caught and detained, and then they would be taking you away pretty much to where it came from.
Yeah, I guess so. So, when you look at the way the European Union are handling their Mediterranean crisis and the way that Trump is handling the Mexican crisis, who's got it right, who's got it wrong? Are they both wrong?
Yeah, actually, I think they're both wrong. With the EU, they've got no clue. And I think that again goes to the fact that they've got they're not in touch with the rest of people in Europe and Europeans. And you can see that with the rise of all these different parties that are actually anti-immigration. Mm-hmm. I think with Trump, what we got is he's doing a knee-jerk reaction, which is to start closing up the borders. And I totally agree with that, because if you've got a lot of people coming in which are causing high levels of crime, of course, it's the principle of any government is to look after and defend its people. Yeah. And at the end of the day, anyone that doesn't close for them line is a criminal, and they should be dealt with that.
Well, that's the approach the Americans are taking, James. It's led to great controversy, although I suspect, amongst Trump's voters in Middle America, they might not have liked the pictures they've seen this week, but they will agree with the principle. 70% of Americans want the US government to get tough on illegal immigration. James from Kataya in New Zealand, thank you for your call. I'll be in New Zealand later in this year. OK, we'll keep your calls going on immigration. But what a day. It's a heat wave, and I think it could go on for a bit. And we did talk a month or two ago, when the snow was down in March, about what the prospects could be for a barbecue summer. So we're going to get John Ketley on after the break to get him to make weather predictions, barbecue predictions, ahead of the England football match. And I'll warn him now, I'm even going to ask him how the football's going to go. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC, and it's now 11:45.
Coming up at 12 on LBC, Majid Nawaz.
The government stands accused of failing to act on the rise of stabbings as police and youth services face cuts. Do you feel safe?
Majid Nawaz on LBC.
At Experian.co.uk, we know being single's no fun. That's why we do everything we can to help you meet your ideal match, your data self.
Until I met my data self, I had no idea which credit card was right for me. He was able to show me the ones I was eligible for before I even applied. It really has changed my life.
Find out how your data self could help you make better financial decisions at Experian.co.uk. Experian Limited is a credit broker, not a lender, working with selected lenders.
You've had those damp patches on the walls for a while now. And like a lot of people, you do nothing, even though it's a health risk and it's damaging your property. So get it sorted once and for all with London Damp Specialists. They offer a standard 30-year guarantee on all their work, and it's usually ready to paint in around 10 days. But best of all, they won't take any payment until your walls are completely dry. Search LondonDampSpecialists.com, where you only pay when it's dry.
Fancy a spot of alfresco dining this summer? At B&Q, get the Holly 2-seater steel bistro set. It's rust-resistant and it's only £87. Don't forget to grab a parasol and base if you want to stay cool. So for low prices of must-have garden furniture, you can do it when you B&Q it.
Ah, the Caribbean. Another cruise, another me. Will I discover my adventurous side ziplining over treetops in St. Kitts? or lift the lid on my foodie side on Antigua with a luscious lobster lunch. I could explore the delights of a spiced rum on St. Lucia. And back on board, cap it all off tonight and unleash my inner diva on the dance floor.
Cruise the Caribbean from just $1399 per person for 13 nights and explore the world in you. Now with £340 per cabin to spend on board. P&O Cruises.
This is the life.
Subject to availability based on B906A JE grade. Conditions apply at or protected.
If you own a Swiss watch and it's time to sell it, speak to watches.co.uk. The whole process runs like clockwork. Rolex, Patek Philippe, Omega and more. It only takes a couple of ticks and we pay immediately. Or if you just fancy a change, we could take yours in part exchange. From time on your hands to money in your pocket, it couldn't be easier with watches.co.uk. The pre-owned Swiss watch specialist.
The Nigel Farage Show. Text 84850.
A crisis meeting in Brussels today by the European Union ahead of a summit coming up on Thursday. And, it has to be said, President Merkel in Germany, her position now very, very vulnerable. Immigration, a hot topic, both in Europe and, of course, in the USA, where Trump has come under great criticism this week. And you may well today be talking about such things, but I'm guessing the main subject of conversation so far this morning has been the weather, because it's really rather lovely out there. It looks a bit like Heatwave Sunday and set, I think, for a few days to continue. And, you know, are you going to barbecues this afternoon? The pubs, by the way, are predicting possibly record takings during the England football game against Panama today. Let's go to legendary weather forecaster, John Ketley. Good morning, John.
Yes, good morning, Nigel.
Now, it must have been the summer solstice at Stonehenge must have been amazing this year.
Yes, it's just really turning out to be a pretty good summer so far, isn't it? You know, technically we do talk about summer as being statistically the 1st of June to the end of August, but it's nice when you get the nicer weather earlier on than that, and we all remember, don't we? We spoke, I think, at length about the warm weather that came along during April, and then that hottest May Day bank holiday on the 7th of May.
That's right. It's been actually remarkable. And I noticed after what was a very wet winter, the grass was growing like billio, and suddenly the lawns are looking a little bit browner. It's been pretty dry this month,
yeah,
isn't it?
What's bothering me, Nigel, is that because of all that moisture that we did have, and then the heat suddenly arrives, we've seemed to be getting a lot of mosquitoes in my garden. It's biting me to death.
Yes.
So that's a downside of all this sort of weather, and it doesn't take long before temperatures start to soar, and then we start to get more humid and more sultry, oppressive weather, and that's probably what's going to happen in various parts of the UK in this coming 7 to 10 days. So the hot weather is certainly driving in at the moment. The highest temperature recently was Bournemouth, 23 degrees, but a few places will get 25, 26 degrees as we go through today. And then as the week goes on, different parts of the country will see exceptional temperatures, probably up to 28 to 30. Not everywhere and not at the same time, because one of the things that does happen when you get fairly light winds, you do get these sea breezes developing around some coasts onshore, which just spoils things a little bit. But you hear the television weatherman or lady saying those refreshing breezes. Well, actually, it can feel quite chilly. So you've got to be careful what you say when you're doing broadcasting like that.
So we've got a barbecue summer coming up for the next 7 to 10 days, and any thoughts thereafter?
Well, you know, we did talk last time about when the barbecue would be, and I said the barbecue summer would be around about Wimbledon fortnight. I'm not changing from that. I think the hottest weather at the moment is definitely lined up for this next 7 to 10 days. It may turn cooler, and there may be some showery weather during July, but at the moment, you know, I think we should just enjoy the fact that it is turning out to be a pretty warm spell of weather we're having in most parts of the country. Yeah.
It really is. And John, England v Panama this afternoon, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it'll be hot. 31 degrees is the top temperature, and you don't want me to put my neck out any further than that, do you? I mean,
you spent your life putting your neck out.
Well, I have.
And being praised and being criticised, so go on, give it a go. What's the score going to be?
Well, I've got away with it for all these years, so I'll get away with it one more time. Despite the fact that it'll be very hot for the England boys, I think temperatures, the scoreline will be round about 2-0. I'd be very happy with 2-0. And I might just throw this at you. There are thunderstorms rolling around the different parts of Russia at the moment. They're not hitting the ground, generally speaking, but I think there will be some hotter weather coming in for the next match on Thursday, which will be against Belgium.
Yep.
And I think thunderstorms are certainly on the cards for that one.
Terrific. John Ketley, thank you very much indeed. Well, wasn't I cruel there to ask him to forecast what the football would be as well as just the weather? But hey, 7 to 10 days of great weather coming up. If you can, take advantage of it and enjoy it, because my experience of the last few Augusts is when all the kids are off, it tends to be wet and windy. Back to this serious, vexed issue of migration. Who's got the right approach, the EU or the Americans? Vicky from Brighton is my next caller. Hello.
Oh, hello. Good morning, Nigel.
Good morning.
Ignorant Brexiteer here.
Oh, gosh. And are you a bit racist as well, Vicky?
Well, I've been called that, but I certainly am not.
No, thank
you. The
you.
point I wanted to make, Nigel, is simply this. I'm not talking about genuine refugees trying to get into Europe. The world has always been compassionate and hopefully will continue to do so, and this country has always been very generous. I'm talking about really, economic migrants. And frankly, the EU have only got themselves to blame, because for the last 20, 30, 40 years, through the common agricultural policy or whatever, they have shoved tariffs to anybody not in the EU. And, of course, the main export from poorer countries will tend to be fruit, vegetables, this kind of stuff. So basically, they have kept these countries poor.
Yes, and Vicky, let me just add to that under the common fisheries policy, there are a series of fisheries partnerships where they basically bribe very, very poor African countries, particularly off the west coast of Africa, to go and catch their fish in huge industrial quantities.
To sell their rights. It's absolutely appalling. So basically, you can't blame these people who come from very poor economies and so on and so forth trying to do it. But the EU have only got themselves to blame. And am I not right in saying, Nigel, that if we, after we leave the EU, have a free trade policy with countries like this, we lose nothing. We gain a lot because these products will be cheaper in our supermarkets because the tariffs that are currently charged for these countries go straight to Brussels anyway.
Vicky, slightly separate debate, but if we wanted to, we could make bras, shoes, underwear, food, fruit, cut flowers. We could make all of those things a lot cheaper. The only difficulty would be we'd have our own farming community and producers to think about and deal with as well. But if we wanted to, Brexit could make the shopping basket for a family on the average wage they'd be a lot better off if we took advantage. But I fear we're a long way from that. What is ironic, Vicky, is that immigration was one of the main drivers of the Brexit vote, and here we've got emergency summits in Brussels, Trump in the middle of a storm in America, and in this country, the government doesn't even want to discuss immigration.
Well, I was poor, and frankly, Mrs. Merkel, arrogantly, because she was so beholden, because she thinks she just runs Europe and tells Europe what to do, just took it on herself to say what she did 2 years ago.
Well, I think it was based on guilt, Vicky. I think there is still amongst many German people, it's changing, but amongst many German people there is still a tremendous sense of guilt about what happened 75 years ago. It hasn't gone away. And, by the way, I'm not suggesting for one moment people should forget what happened 75 years ago, but I do think her decision was based on guilt and wanting to look good on the international stage. It wasn't based on rationale. It wasn't based on logic. And between her and Mr. Juncker, they have, and I'm going to say this, they have directly led their policy to the deaths of thousands of people in the Mediterranean. Vicky, I thank you. We're going to stay in Brighton, but we're going to go to Stephen. Stephen, hello, good morning.
Hello, Nigel. Nice to speak to you.
Good to speak to you. So, who's got this right? Who's got it wrong?
Well, you've just been discussing Angela Merkel. I think it was actually quite a calculated decision. Inviting so many people meant the richest, the healthiest, the brainiest are the people who would get to Germany first. And it's actually the more disadvantaged that would struggle. And those are the ones primarily who probably lost their lives. Whereas for Germany, it's wonderful for them. They're getting the richest and the brightest.
I mean, Stephen, I understand your point. I understand your point that, yes, the healthiest certainly are the ones that would get through, and the most ambitious are the ones that would get through. But isn't there, Stephen, a massive cultural problem here? Don't a lot of these young men come from countries in which women are at best second-class citizens, and hasn't the rise in assaults against women and everything else turned the population against this policy?
Well, I don't know about that because I don't live in Germany and I'm a bit distrusting of the media.
Certainly what happened, Stephen, what happened outside Cologne train station a couple of New Year's Eves ago was seen as an outrage. And there's a similar thing that's happened in Sweden with Malmo, city of Malmo, having a massive rise in these kinds of crimes. The problem, and you're right to say these are ambitious young people, but they've come in effectively as refugees when hardly any of them, Stephen, would qualify genuinely as refugees. And I think it's left a big, big cultural problem. Stephen, I think I've quickly got time for Norman, who's calling from Dover, my last call of the morning. Good morning, Norman.
Good morning, Nigel. Very pleasure to speak to you this morning.
Good to have you on.
My comment is that European Union has been passing the buck as far as these migrants are concerned. They've been shifting them to northern France. Nobody wants them throughout Europe, and they end up congregating in the coastal towns of northern Europe, and they should be stopped at the border before they actually enter the European Union.
Yes, I mean, Calais is a knock-on consequence, is it not, of the policies we've got over the Mediterranean. Do you know, Norman, I sit next to Juncker. I gave 2 speeches in 2015 as he was launching this policy, saying it would be a disaster, saying that it would lead to deaths in the Mediterranean. He wasn't up for listening. Norman, I thank you. I thank everybody. I'll be back tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. This afternoon at 3, Ian Payne's in for Andrew Castle, but up now, it's Majid Nawaz.
Thank you, Nigel. Enjoy the game while I'm stuck here. Coming up, sweet and fatty snacks sold at checkouts and as part of supermarket deals will be banned under new government proposals to halve childhood obesity in England by 2030. Will this help, or is it the nanny state gone mad? Before that, struggling young families have seen their access to social housing fall as fast as their chances of buying a home. How difficult has it been for you to get on the housing ladder? But first, politicians and youth workers accuse the government of failing to act on the rise of stabbings and warned of the disastrous effect cuts to police and youth services were having on young people. Do you feel safe?
On your radio, on your phone, and here.
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 12 o'clock, the Mayor of London says police are out in force in the east of the capital after a 15-year-old boy was stabbed to death. 3 teenage boys have been arrested after officers were called to a fight outside a community centre in Romford following a party last night. Zubia Chowdhury lives nearby. He's told LBC how it unfolded.
I was watching upstairs and then police came 15-20 minutes late when fight goes on. And then everybody was screaming, and you know how the kids are. They just keep screaming and then running around all sorts.